Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. We have a very interesting report that we are going to talk about. It's something, it reminds me of something out of a Mission Impossible movie. Um, and after last night, I honestly did not think that there would be two exclusives like this dropping back to back, but y'all come on in and we'll get started. And we'll talk about this special report that was investigated and reported on by an organization called The Century, which is ran by George Clooney, or co-founded by George Clooney, the actor George Clooney. He founded The Century organization a while back, actually. This organization called The Century, if you actually just even look at what their goal is in life, just their what's their motivation, what's their goal. Basically, war crimes should not pay. It's an investigative report, and it is breaking. CNN dropped this about 9 hours ago, and I suspect this is going to be all over various international newspapers within the next 24 to 48 hours after you all see this. Again, Russian mercenaries are now being accused of outright killing people, killing citizens in the Central African Republic. This past year, they are committed of a lot of human atrocities, murders, rapes, all this going down in the Central African Republic in Africa. The Century, like I said, is an organization co-founded by George Clooney. You know, his wife is a human rights investigative lawyer. She's a human rights lawyer. She's more of an international lawyer, international law type background. I would not be surprised if she was somewhat behind some of this, some of this stuff. It's crazy. It's very interesting. I'm going to play this here and then we'll continue. We'll continue forward here.
It's no secret that Russian mercenaries are active in at least half a dozen countries around the world. They've been accused of fomenting instability. But now, according to our investigation, they may well be guilty of war crimes. We wanted to travel to the Central African Republic, but we were refused access on the grounds of our previous reporting on the Russian presence there. Still, we managed to send someone to interview victims and witnesses of these crimes. We had to change their names and disguise their faces for their own protection. And I do want to warn our viewers that some of this material is graphic.
The aftermath of a massacre at a mosque in the city of Bambari in the Central African Republic. At least 12 bodies are visible on the ground. A woman and a child are among the dead. Dozens of civilians had taken shelter in the Al Taqwa Mosque that day, after witnesses say Russian mercenaries and government troops came hunting for rebel fighters. Abdullahi was inside the mosque, but instead of finding sanctuary, he told CNN they became targets.
The gendarmerie and the Russians asked us to take the women and children out of the mosque. 6 of us walked out with our hands raised. They searched us and found nothing. We hadn't even gone 5 meters when they started shooting at us. 4 people died, 1 jumped a wall, and I was shot in the right foot.
That same day, Jabrila told CNN her 15-year-old son was killed by Russians firing from a helicopter. When her husband went out to find him, he was shot down too.
My husband was buried together with my 15-year-old son. When the burial was over, we couldn't even say a word. I was crying. My children also came next to me, wailing. It was the Russians who killed my husband, leaving me with children in pain.
A confidential UN report found that abuses were carried out on both sides in Bambari, but that the Russians may have committed war crimes, and it does not appear to be an isolated incident. Over several months, CNN and the independent investigative group The Sentry have obtained testimony and documents implicating Russian contractors deployed to train the Central African Army in a wide range of atrocities during fighting between government and rebel forces, including mass shootings, torture, and the burning of villages. Sorcha McLeod is on the UN Working Group on Mercenaries. In March, it sent details of alleged abuses to the Russian and Central African Republic governments. Grave human rights abuses, including rape, summary executions, targeted killings, torture, forced disappearances, murders, and other abuses. I mean, we're talking about war crimes here, potentially, are we not?
Yes, we are. We are seeing some of the most serious human rights violations and humanitarian law violations, and we're seeing them on a widespread scale. People on the ground are absolutely terrified.
It is a stark contrast from the story Russia tells. In this recent movie, Tourist, funded by a company associated with the Russian mercenaries, they are lauded as heroic defenders who have liberated Central Africa. In reality, Russia's presence in this war-torn, mineral-rich nation has always been controversial, even as it has ballooned from 170 contracted trainers in 2017 to around 2,300 now, according to a UN document obtained by The Sentry, with more than 30 bases spread out across the country. 39-year-old teacher Nemery shows our camera the scars from wounds he says were inflicted by Russian mercenaries at an outpost outside Bambari. They took us to the Russian base, tied us up with rope, and started to torture us. They even used a bayonet to injure my left foot deeply, he says. Their actions were evil and barbaric.
We are seeing a pattern of behavior by these Russian private contractors. This has happened in other countries. We've seen it, for example, in relation to Libya, where Russian private contractors were involved in a variety of human rights violations, in a variety of international humanitarian law violations.
But for the victims of these alleged crimes, there is little hope for justice. Private military contractors are technically illegal in Russia, and so don't officially exist. And many locals live in fear of repercussions from a shadowy and unaccountable force.
CNN obviously tried to reach out to multiple people to get some response from the Russian side. We approached Yevgeny Prigozhin. He is the Russian oligarch with close ties to President Putin, who is believed to be behind these mercenary groups. He's also the architect of the famous troll factory that was involved with the meddling in the U.S. election back in 2016. Unsurprisingly, he did not respond to our request for comment, and the Russian government also did not respond, but they did respond to the UN Working Group on Mercenaries letters of allegation, saying that Russian trainers in the Central African Republic are unarmed and not participating in hostilities. Well, we can say definitively, Pamela, based on our extensive reporting, that that simply is not true.
Now, listen. These type of reports come out once in a lot, once in a 10-year span or once in a 20-year span. And I have to go through this with you guys. It's I can absolutely appreciate, some video content there, but we've actually got to look into some of these accusations. And I would love it if I could get a copy of this report. I don't, I'm just going to throw it out there. If it finds its way into my mailbox, then so be it, right? And I will throw my email address so that it will run across the bottom here so that you can always throw it my way. Now, The article titled, "It Was Our Children They Killed." This was released about, like I said, about 9 hours ago, this breaking news came out. I really hope that we'll see some other bloggers talking about this. The Young Turks. There's a slew of you guys I can think of that probably are interested in this, and this is a way more important story today than anything Donald Trump, as far as I'm concerned. You need to hear this. Fatuma was at home with her children in the town of Bambari when the firing began on the afternoon of February the 15th this year, 2021. Terrified, she gathered up her children and fled to a nearby mosque, the equivalent to a church. Some people don't know that, right? Some people don't know mosque is equivalent to a church. Thinking it would be a safe refuge in the Central African Republic market town of Bambari. Instead of finding sanctuary within its walls, she and dozens of others, men, women, and children, became targets. Both her children were shot but survived. At least a dozen people didn't. It was the Russians and the FACA, the Car Army, Fatuma said. We have covered the Central African Republic military. I mean, Vice has also followed them. I would expect Vice is going to probably be dropping some video content on this. I did see that they liked the Twitter post, the tweet. I hope that they do. They've been in the CAF reporting for some years now. Russian mercenaries, supported by at least one combat helicopter, attacked the neighborhood as they hunted for rebels known as the Salika. But according to multiple witnesses, they opened fire indiscriminately against civilians, many of them hiding at the Al-Taqwa Mosque. This was this year, February 15th, 4 months ago. There was not a single Salika element found in the mosque, Fatuma said. It was just the civilian population that they killed. We didn't even see a dead Salika body on the ground. It was our children they killed. Other local sources say there may have been 2 Salika taking refuge in the mosque, but they were unarmed. Look at the building. The evidence, look at that. Bullet holes are seen inside the Al-Taqwa Mosque in Bambari, Central African Republic, in a photo taken in May 2021. This is just last month. The thought that Russians leave their own country to come into Africa to shoot and kill down women, children, and men like that. The incident in Bambari is one of dozens investigated by CNN and the Sentry that show a wide range of human rights abuses by Russian mercenaries deployed to CAR. The Sentry is an independent investigative group co-founded by George Clooney and John Prendergast that follows the money connected to mass atrocities. Their mission is war crimes shouldn't pay. Despite a pervasive climate of fear, dozens of people in the Central African Republic have spoken of summary killings, instances of rape and torture, and indiscriminate attacks on civilians, including the burning of their homes. CNN and the Sentry have spoken with multiple witnesses to events in Bambari that afternoon. According to some, several civilians were shot in cold blood when the Russians and local troops ordered people to leave the mosque late that afternoon. You can see the bullet holes in the exterior wall of the Al-Taqwa Mosque in Bambari, Central African Republic. This photo was taken back in May. One 20-year-old man, Abdullah, told CNN that he came out with several others, hands in the air. They were searched, but then Russians and FACA started shooting. We were 5 meters from them when they opened fire, he said in an almost matter-of-fact way, using his hands to show what happened. 4 people were killed, Another escaped over a wall. Give me just a sec here. Okay. A bullet struck Abdullah in the lower leg as he ran. He hid for nearly 10 hours because access to the local hospital had been blocked by the FACA. And later, he had to have his leg amputated below the knee. Others told CNN that they were fired on by Russian helicopters that afternoon. CNN has confirmed that several Russian combat helicopters were shipped to Kar earlier this year. The total number killed in and around the mosque that February afternoon is unknown, but from the accounts gathered by CNN, it was somewhere between a dozen and 20. It was also far from being an isolated incident. This is the body of a victim of the shootings in and around the Al Taqwa Mosque in February of this year. CNN and The Century obtained confidential UN documents that support the accusations against the Russian mercenaries made by witnesses and victims. You know, the word mercenary almost doesn't even go right with what you would envision. Let me stick to the content. A report compiled by the UN peacekeeping force in Kar, known as MINUSCA, said that in Bambari, FACA and bilateral forces, especially Russians and elements believed to be Syrians, may have committed war crimes, especially in executing civilians and other individuals who were not taking part in hostilities. Sources have told CNN that an unknown number of Syrian mercenaries who had been fighting for Russian contractors in Libya were subsequently sent to Kar, Central African Republic. In its report on the incident in Bambari, the UN Working Group on Mercenaries said Russian mercenaries stood accused of using excessive force and shelling protected sites such as mosques and IDP camps. One woman in Bambari, Aja, told CNN her husband had taken shelter at the mosque. Even though civilians took shelter there, the Russians fired. For 3 days, the Russians would not allow us to retrieve the bodies. Another woman told CNN her 15-year-old son was killed by Russians firing from a helicopter. When her husband tried to find him, he too was cut down and died in hospital 4 days later. Quote, my husband was buried together with my 15-year-old son. The MINUSCA team that investigated the incident in mid-March reported that 3 men were believed to have been executed by FACA Russian forces. These 3 men were not armed when they were arrested at the entrance of the mosque. This is the confidential UN report that you see there. This document was obtained by The Century, the organization co-founded by George Clooney. He's going to absolutely have to step up his security game now that people know that he's in this type of business, almost like a secret security firm. He's definitely going to have some serious, his whole family is going to have some serious security. But I just want, I want to say thank you, George. I really do. Like, it is so appreciative that civilian people who weren't even born there throw their money at creating a whole security group to track down dirty money. It's almost one of those things, sometimes you'll find that there's people that have a lot of money that are rich. They don't care about having a lot of money. You would never know that they're rich by the way they dressed, by the way they look, because the name in that game is, I don't want you to know what I'm worth, right? I mean, none of us, it really, at the end of the day, money's just money. It's just a tool. But just think how much money that an individual would have to put into an organization like this for it to be literally coming out with a report across an international audience, and it dropped on CNN first. I know that his wife is somehow involved. She is the lawyer. She is an attorney, an international human rights. Like, she investigates this exact type of stuff. It's been her whole career, from what I understand. They have the UN went public with their concerns regarding Russian mercenaries killing innocent people that are not engaged in hostile action towards them. I mean, imagine, the Russian military or people that used to be in the military, or maybe members of the military, whatever they consider themselves, coming to your country or into your neighborhood and then start shooting you and your neighbors down, and your animals and your pets and your children and your women. And then you go to take, sanctuary at a mosque. It's a holy place. And they come and they kill you as you walk out the door of the mosque. It's unbelievable. The UN did go public about this. Experts saying they had received and continue to receive reports of grave human rights abuses and violations of international humanitarian law attributable to the private military personnel operating jointly with Qatar's armed forces, and in some instances, UN peacekeepers. These men have all this money and they go down to a fucked up place. It's already fucked up. The CAF. I mean, it's a place of war. So much blood has been poured there. So much corruption. And they go down there and they just start killing people's children and their women and their husbands and their wives and their animals, and burning their homes down. What the hell? And these men are not in an official capacity as the Russian army. Not like in Syria, where we have seen Russian jets drop chemical bombs on the civilian population in Syria. We have seen this time and time again. Chemical bombs, buckets, and just helicopters, even Russian-made helicopters and planes that are indiscriminately dropping these chemical weapons, killing Syrians at a crazy rate. It's unbelievable. And Bashar al-Assad, him and Putin are cool. One member of the working group says we're seeing some of the most serious human rights violations and humanitarian law violations, and we're seeing them on a widespread scale. People on the ground are absolutely terrified. The Russian government denied the allegations and insisted the contractors in Kar are unarmed and do not take part in hostilities. The Kar government also denied the allegations, but said an inquiry would establish the facts. But again, it appears that they are not telling the truth. CNN was blocked from getting into Kar. They were unable to provide this report or do anything on the ground in Kar because the Russian mercenaries would not let them. So who's running that country? Russia or the FACA or Kar, the government of Kar? In 2017, the UN Security Council waived an arms embargo on Kar, agreeing to the deployment of 175 Russian trainers for their local military. For the Russians, that was a foot in the door. Now, let's not even pretend like we have not read and talked about the fact that this is a very mineral-rich country. Your cell phones that you use every day, the computers that you use every day, they are all made with a certain element, a mineral that has to be mined from over there. It's in every phone. Every phone. It's been known for years. They are very minerally rich. A former Russian military intelligence officer, Valery Sakharov, became the security advisor to Kar's president, Faustin Archang Tudera. But as CNN has previously reported, all but 5 of the trainers who arrived, along with a large supply of weapons, were not Russian military, but private contractors hired by companies linked to a Russian oligarch close to President Vladimir Putin. I mean, just imagine, serving time in the military, and then when you get out of the military, you get an offer in a position in car. And, you won't be essentially with the military, but you will continue to be able to act like you're in the military, act like you're a commando, indiscriminately killing people. There's not going to be, the fact that there's no like Russian military, official Russian military, it's almost a good thing for Putin, right? They're not going to be able to come back and say, oh, well, the Russian military was involved in atrocities. All they can say is these mercenaries were involved in atrocities. There were nearly 2,300. There are now nearly 2,300 Russian mercenaries at more than 30 bases in the Central African Republic. So this went up from 175 to over 2,300 Russian mercenaries. This is the locations of their bases. Now, a MINUSCA document obtained by Sentry estimates there are now some 2,300 mercenaries in the car, including the Syrian contingent. My understanding is this Syrian contingent is comprised of actual men that are Syrians. How, can I just say this? I know like my opinion really should not matter, and it does not matter. It really does not matter at the end of the day, except for to me. I just find it really odd that any Syrians would be fighting alongside Russians, being the fact that it's Russians that have been dropping the chemical bombs on your country, killing your people, your civilian people at that. We've seen evidence of this time and time again. Now, alongside Rwandan paramilitaries and car troops, they are doing a lot less training and a lot more fighting, especially since a counteroffensive against rebel groups began in January of this year. The Russians have imported armored personnel carriers, combat helicopters, the Mi-8 and the Mi-24, and drones. One source told Sentry, this private security group, that they have drones. They use them at all times to locate people. Additionally, according to our internal MINUSCA document obtained by Sentry, the Russian mercenaries are using the same type of anti-personnel mines they used in Libya. All sides in Kar's conflict have been accused of human rights violations, but the Russians' role on the front lines has become deeply problematic for the UN peacekeeping force in Kar. The Office of the UN Human Rights Commissioner said in March that state agents and their allies arbitrarily kill civilians, and that people have been tortured, ill-treated, and arbitrarily arrested. Several human rights and aid organizations in Kar would not comment on incidents involving the mercenaries, citing the risk to their staff. It's real. It's very real. A CNN team that applied for permission to visit Kar this month to report on the security and humanitarian situation was repeatedly denied. Repeatedly denied. Officials came up with several explanations, but in a text message, the Minister of Communications, Ange Kazugwai, not sure I said that right, told CNN our position is maintained. Namely, that your background and the evidence in our possession do not support us in granting the requested accreditations. I've never known of CNN to be not. Anyway. This appears to be in reference to CNN's 2019 reporting from the country on the links between the Russian mercenary presence and lucrative mineral concessions. Always about greed, right? It's always about greed. At the end of the day, again, the Kar is minerally rich. The resources in Kar, they have things that are used in our cell devices and our on every day. Like you wouldn't even be able to operate your cell device without these minerals. It's scary. There's a photo of instructors in car. Again, they've ballooned from 170 in 2017 to 2,300 in 2021. Y'all notice how they love to keep their faces hidden? Love to hide their face. If they were really proud about what they were doing, why are they always hiding their face? They can't be proud of that. Now, a gruesome pattern. Gruesome pattern here. Reported incidents of abuses have spiked since December when Russian mercenaries joined a government offensive against rebel groups that had tried to advance on the capital. In a letter to Ivan Machetin, the Russian mercenaries forces representative in Kar in March, it was written that the deployment of your personnel appears to have contributed to the rapid escalation and intensification of hostilities, in turn resulting in civilian harm and suffering. Besides the killings in Bambari, CNN and Century have gathered testimony on many other incidents. Late in December, Russian mercenaries opened fire on a truck that failed to stop at a checkpoint. CNN spoke to the driver of the truck, Malik, who said he received a wound to his hand, which was later amputated. He said 3 people had been killed, including an employee of the group MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières. MSF confirmed the death but would not comment further. MSF is a known group. It's an international group. They typically provide medical care to people in and around Africa. They were absolutely on the front lines when Ebola ravaged that continent. An internal report by MINUSCA confirmed the excessive use of force by Russian forces at the checkpoint that had left 3 civilians dead. The report said that the impacts of the bullets may indicate that shooters intended to kill as many people as they possibly could. UN drone video obtained and geolocated by CNN showed homes being burned in a village near the town of Basangwa on February 23rd. Bilateral forces burned homes in a village situated 13 kilometers, approximately 8 miles from Basangwa. The term bilateral means Faka Russian. On March 14th, a group of Russians shot dead the chief of a village near Bambari after accusing him of being sympathetic to the rebels. The community leader said the Russians set fire to 60 homes and stole motorbikes and other goods. He also alleged that the Russians also assaulted several women, some who had to flee into the bush. McLeod told CNN in many conflicts, quote, when there's no oversight, where there's no monitoring of their activities, then the risk of sexual, gender-based violence goes through the roof. Men, it is really sad how much rape happens in Africa, just period. Just in general, period. 1 second, you guys. Give me just 1 second, if you don't mind. Let me fix something real quick. Okay. Russian abuses have included the abduction of community leaders. 4 members of the Fulani community were extracted from the town of Braya and flown to an unknown destination. CNN has seen photographs of the men with hoods on their heads being put on a plane by Russian mercenaries at the local airstrip at the end of April. The MINUSCA document adds that the incident causes great anxiety among the population, where some fear disappearance, and urges an immediate investigation into where the 4 might have been taken. Several witnesses told CNN and Century that the Russians had a base outside Bambari where torture was commonplace. It's 2021, guys. It's 2021. It's 2021. And we're actually sitting here talking like this. We are actually sitting here discussing the fact that people outright accused these Russian mercenaries of outright murder, just cold-blooded ass murder, man. Nimri, a 39-year-old, said he and others had been taken to the base and roped together. They were held for a week. He said he'd been beaten and stabbed in the foot with a bayonet. Still wearing a bandage around his ankle, Nimri chose his words carefully. Quote, "The Russians were wicked and barbaric." Another account came from a 16-year-old who was detained with his brother by local troops in late February and taken to a Russian camp on the outskirts of Bambari. He said he was beaten until he passed out, and when he regained consciousness, he saw his brother covered in blood, tied up like an animal, his feet and hands bound behind his back. The interrogators accused the pair of being Salika rebels. When his brother was finally released, he was unconscious in the hospital for 3 days. The dilemma. Moroccan peacekeepers from MINUSCA, the UN mission in the Central African Republic, patrolling the town of Bangassou on February 3rd, 2021. MINUSCA's chief, Mankwar, I'm not sure how to say that, Njai, said in April that he had discussed allegations of human rights abuses by the Russians at a meeting in Moscow with Russia's deputy foreign minister, and that the Russian authorities had promised full cooperation with the UN's investigations. Zakharov, the Russian advisor to President Todera, shot back within hours. The declarations of Nadai are false and have no relation to reality. This is what he tweeted, y'all. He tweeted this, okay? He tweeted this. Now, they say Zakharov is the one behind all these mercenary groups, essentially. But, he tweets. He tweets his response. There's no official press release or anything. He just tweets. They learned from Donald Trump. All you got to do is just tweet. You don't need no PR team. You don't need no official, you don't need an official lane or anything at the end of the day. Like, what? At the end of May, Nadai condemned the mobilization of 13 and 14-year-old kids who should be at school and who are being given money to protest in front of MINUSCA headquarters, demanding the departure of MINUSCA. At the same time, the head of UN peacekeeping missions, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, said there had been several worrying cases of difficulties with the Central African Armed Forces and their partners. Quote, "Report on human rights violations is being finalized in coordination with the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights and will be released soon." Now, the quest for gold. The growing Russian presence in CAR serves multiple goals. Several companies linked to the mercenaries are part of the total business empire of Yevgeny Prigozhin. They include Suez Services, Wagner PMC, and Labe Invest. Prigozhin has denied any link to Wagner and has repeatedly refused to talk to CNN. UN experts said in March that they were deeply disturbed by the interconnected roles of all three and their connections to a series of violent attacks that have occurred since the presidential elections in December. To exploit these mineral concessions, the companies need territorial control. CNN's analysis of the focus of Russian mercenary activity shows it is concentrated in areas rich in minerals. Gold miners work in the Nasima gold mine, about 25 miles from Bambari. This is a mine, a gold mine. Look at it. There has been so many examples of minerally rich places in in Africa, that so many stories of just brutality that seems to happen around these minerally rich places. Near Bambari, for example, there are extensive gold deposits. In other words, there's a lot of gold in this mine, a lot of gold. Last year, the CAR government revoked the license of a Canadian company at Nasima. According to documents obtained by Sentry and seen by CNN, the Ministry of Mines then gave a 25-year concession to a company called Midas Resources, which is listed as a Russian entity. So the CAR government revoked the license of a Canadian company that was here mining for gold and instead gave a 25-year lease, essentially, a 25-year concession. So for the next 25 years, they will be able to mine and profit off anything that comes out of this mine. And the very people that dig the gold out of this mine will continue to be poor, will continue to walk without shoes on their feet, will continue to be abused for all they want is their labor. It's horrible. 25-year lease? Last year, the Sentry gathered testimony from several people who say the mercenaries have expelled locals from those mines. One man alleged that Russian mercenaries carried out summary executions of suspected rebels in a village near gold and diamond deposits. Everything that is mining is their priority in Bambari. They loot in search of gold and diamonds. A community leader from a village south of Bambari alleged that when the Russians and CAR troops found local people at a gold mine, they slit their throats, adding, quote, they want to create fear so that people don't go to the mining area anymore. According to John Prendergast, co-founder of the Sentry, quote, this lucrative new model for plunder represents a rapidly spreading threat, delivering death and devastation and undermining peace and security, not only in Central Africa, but in other hotspots around the world. A billboard with Russian propaganda is seen in Bangui. The message reads, Russia, hand in hand with the Central African Republic. Talk a little, work a lot. The Russians have not been shy about advertising their military presence in CAR. A feature film showing Russian mercenaries fighting alongside local troops against rebels was made at the Russians' main base at Baringo and given a gala premiere at the sports stadium in Bangui in May. An on-screen caption before the movie read that it was, quote, dedicated to the heroic Central African and Russian defenders who have liberated Central Africa. If you have followed anything regarding Central Africa over the years, what did they liberate exactly? The film was produced by a Russian company linked to Prigozhin's business empire. The Russians now exercise overwhelming influence over the government of President Tudera. In other words, they're saying to President Tudera in the Central African Republic that they're wearing the pants basically, that they're running all over you. They actually control your country. You don't. You know, it's really horrible to even think that a president, a president or a leader would literally compromise himself and allow these atrocities to happen in his country to his people. For what? What are you gaining? He's got to be gaining something. The Russians now exercise overwhelming influence over the government of President Tudera, and judging by their responses at government and private levels, appear to prefer to shrug off the pattern of accusations rather than to address them. Unacceptably, there seems to be no investigations and no accountability for these abuses. As one civilian said of his experience at the hands of the mercenaries, there is no clarity, no charges. Someone can be executed for nothing. France, the former colonial power, has expressed alarm at the situation. In an interview last month, President Emmanuel Macron described Tudera as a hostage to the Wagner Group. And this month, France suspended military cooperation with CAR. The government of CAR, meanwhile, has requested another 600 Russian trainers. Russia's deputy ambassador to the UN, Dmitry Polonsky, pledged that if deployed, they would be unarmed. Fascinating. Fascinating, but also at the same time, it's just like, let's take a look here at a few things. Let me take a look at a few things here. Give me just a sec, guys. Give me just 1 second. Now, listen, one of the first things that I did when I started reading this report by the Century is I went to their website and immediately looked to see what sort of jobs they had open. Because someone like me would absolutely be interested in something like this. It's right up my alley. This is the Century. This is their website. War crimes shouldn't pay. This is almost a call to action in your heart, in your spirit. The Century is an investigative and policy team that follows the dirty money connected to African war criminals and transnational war profiteers and seeks to shut those benefiting from violence out of the international financial system. This here is the thing of MI6 reports and the thing of it's amazing. I'm actually really proud of the people that are running this organization. I don't even know them. The fact that they would even have an organization, and this is a .org, this is a org, a 501c. The fact that they have a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to investigating where dirty money goes, that's connected to African war criminals and transnational war profiteers, and seeks to shut those benefiting from violence out of the international financial system by disrupting the cost benefit calculations of those who hijack governments for self-enrichment. We seek to counter the main drivers of conflict and create new leverage for peace, human rights, and good governance. The Century is composed of financial investigators, international human rights lawyers, regional experts, as well as former law enforcement agents, intelligence officers, policymakers, investigative journalists, and banking professionals. Co-founded by George Clooney, John Prendergast, the Century is a strategic partner of the Clooney Foundation for Justice. If you guys ever need some help in IT, holler at me. I would run their whole IT environment. down to the data, the data center, down to the individual user, and would do it proudly as long as I had enough money to make it day to day, just to eat. Just the fact that I'd be, working for a place that is their goal, that means a lot. That means a hell of a lot. That means a hell of a lot. And I really want to make you guys aware of this organization, this century. I want y'all to be very aware. Yeah, I definitely went to see if they had any openings, any job availability. Is there any IT positions? I mean, I could definitely do more than IT, but hey, pretty good at it. Interesting. Right now, there is an opening for a senior analyst for the Democratic Republic of Congo. The senior analyst will serve as the senior expert responsible for leading the development of the century's country-focused policy positions on the Democratic Republic of Congo. She or he will lead the organization's efforts to analyze and disrupt the kleptocratic networks, grand corruption, and illicit financial flows that undermine peace, human rights, and good governance in the DRC. She or he will engage with civil society colleagues in the DRC and around the world, country experts, and the diaspora. The senior analyst will work to influence policy in the US, Europe, and other locales with leverage. Again, I don't even think this is like the type of position where you would have like had to have done this exact job, specifically. But I think to really do something like this, your heart has to really be in it, right? This is being a senior analyst for the Democratic Republic of Congo. I mean, that's going to require a lot of networking and getting to know certain people and all that type of stuff. And I don't think, I think anybody could do it, if they have the heart for it. They have the heart and the spirit for it. Here's what the essential responsibilities and tasks are. Here, I'll throw it out there. Maybe some of you may be interested in applying. You'll be working closely with Century colleagues and the Century's co-founder. You'll lead the formulation of original policy recommendations and encourage adoption by senior policymakers within the United States and European Union governments, primarily, as well as engage with relevant corporations and multilateral organizations. Other tasks: build relationships and maintain regular contact with officials, including at high levels in the U.S. government, international organizations such as the UN, European Union, African Union, DRC government, international financial institutions, civil society, corporations, and corporate regulators relevant to conflict resources, and other key policymakers to gather timely and occasionally rapid response information for conflict analysis and report writing. Expand the Century's network of contacts within the policy, NGO community, and Congolese civil society and political communities, and deepen relationships with policymakers and influential actors in the United States and overseas. Provide strategic advice and analysis on corruption and state capture to investigators. Represent the Century in the media through radio, print, and TV interviews and publications of note. Co-author, author, and edit op-eds, memos, reports, and other products on the DRC. Conduct targeted policy work to help build a conflict-free minerals trade in the DRC Great Lakes region. Develop opportunities for the Century to share its findings and policy positions through participating in or hosting events such as panels and conferences. Collaborate with the development team to inform and examine fundraising opportunities. Review fundraising materials and reports to donors. Required skills and experience: excellent writing skills, editing, and presentation skills required. In-depth knowledge of the Democratic Republic of Congo and its political economy. In-depth understanding of issues surrounding corruption and illicit financial flows in the DRC. demonstrated experience engaging policymakers in the United States, including the State Department, Congress, international financial institutions. Okay, let me say this. Bachelor's D's required, master degree preferred in a relevant field. Listen, I just want to throw this out. Never, some people will require degrees because they probably worked really hard to go to college and get theirs. But I'm telling you, you can find some really good talent without a degree. You can find some really good talent. There's a lot of people out here that got a degree in one thing, but they're doing something completely different. But in this case, degree required, it does not say experience in place of, because it's not, there's not too many places you would get this type of experience anyway. Experience engaging with dynamic and evolving teams, experience managing and evaluating complex security issues, including potential crisis situations, knowledge of and experience on key issues and concepts related to financial tools of pressure, able to maintain patience and presence in fast-moving environment. Fluency in French strongly preferred. If you're interested, submit your resume and cover letter to jobs@thecentury.org. Please include senior analyst DRC in the subject line of your email, senior analyst, DRC, I mean. The Century, you know, what else even needs to be said? Amazing. 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 You know, the older I get, Dolly, the older I get, the more interesting things like that are to me. But I don't have a master's degree, so, or a bachelor's, or a what is it? Let's see, I don't hold any of that stuff. But you know, it's never stopped me from obtaining what I wanted in life. You know, I just didn't have an opportunity to go to college like some people did. Anyway, that is the story. I don't, you know, about these Russian mercenaries, you know, that are being accused of these human rights atrocities, rapes, murder of children and women and children. It's unbelievable. There's one more thing. Hold on just 1 second, if you don't mind. There we go. Listen, there's nothing like you know, some video content that kind of bring this home. And I really feel like for the purposes of this commentary and just for the purposes of this message, just getting this message out, it's all I really care about. Watch this, guys. This is in the Central African Republic.
Barara kwazo. Ibadi tablaji bandula. Excusez sakwala.
Bara Ame is on a nightly security patrol in this churchyard in the city of Gwar. Civilians fled here 6 weeks ago when the city was taken by rebels known as the CPC, or Coalition of Patriots for Change, a group that says they're fighting for the rights of Central Africans. Across the country, fighting has forced over 400,000 people to flee their homes in the last 3 months. The National Army freed the city last night, but people here don't yet feel safe enough to go home.
So your house was in between crossfire from the military and the rebels.
Voilà. Donc yanga datimbi agna limiti camp militaire. Donc à ça qui est ici dans yanga télé do tout ça et qui bani. Jaguar so kwa sia il ko ko nduti supportaient même après. De là, ils nous régaliaient et disent qu'ils ont.
And we heard yesterday that the rebels have left the inside of the city. Do you feel like it's any safer now?
Soit dit dit venez. Alors,
I honestly feel like I need to be reading this out loud because some people, they just listen to my lives. They don't necessarily have their eyes on it. So I think it's important that you understand what this man is saying to her. Give me just a sec and go back here. So what he's saying is, my house is at the military base's limit and we're on the roadside. He says we couldn't resist the noise of the Jaguar, the armored vehicle, and the helicopter flying over us. That was why we came to this church.
And we heard yesterday that the rebels have left the inside of the city. Do you feel like it's any safer now?
That's a lie. They haven't gone far. They are 7 kilometers from the city, and that means there is no security. There is nothing that can reassure. I will stay here until I hear that our military is functional and they are crossing through the 4 corners of the city. I can at least accept that, but if it's the Russians, I wouldn't trust them. Even in Boali, they had killed innocent people. This has made people scared when they hear about the Russians.
The Russians are just the latest in a long line of foreign forces to back the national military in its mission to retake 70% of the country from rebel control. There are estimated to be between 600 and 900 of these mercenaries here, working for the Wagner Group, a private military company run by an oligarch close to President Putin.
That we now know is 2,300
people
operate
under the radar, and our attempts to speak to their leadership were turned down. Most civilians are terrified of the Russians, but local official Marcel Bagaza says he has them to thank for freeing his city. We followed as he came out of hiding.
Ça, aujourd'hui, c'est la première fois que vous êtes ici depuis...
1 mois et 2 semaines.
OK, pourquoi?
Et c'est parce que la ville était prise d'assaut par les rebelles.
Ah oui? Et ils ont fui?
Ils ont fui pour le moment. Un repli tactique, dit-on. Mais fuir, c'est beaucoup dire. Ils se sont retirés un tout petit peu, certains les avaient vus dans la ville hier soir.
Vous pensez que c'est possible d'ouvrir la ville demain?
Pourquoi pas?
Okay.
Nous sommes allés hier dans l'après-midi discuter avec le responsable des alliés,
Wow.
des alliés, des Russes. On a discuté avec eux.
They said that all the tools would be
Ils ont
available
dit que toutes les discussions seront prises pour que la
for the
sécurité
people's
revienne,
security.
afin que la population parte à ses occupations. La force de persuasion, c'est que les Russes ne sont pas partis.
OK. Et aujourd'hui, vous faites quoi exactement en ville?
Reconnaissance. Nous essayons de voir qu'est-ce qui a été détruit, qu'est-ce qui n'a pas été détruit.
You'll have to read the subtitles, y'all.
Puar lies along the highway to Cameroon, one of the country's main supply routes. The rebels carried out a months-long blockade of the road, cutting off the capital from critical supplies.
Combien de personnes dormir ici?
On est beaucoup ici.
Sylvie Namkaweri fled her house on the outskirts of Puar when CPC rebels took the town in their advance on the capital.
L'étiquette de travail.
Ah, OK.
Ça, c'est mon carnet.
Donc ça, es-tu les choses que tu as quittées avec?
Ah oui, c'est ça.
And what happened when the rebels arrived here?
Ilondoni Gugara, Mujiko Bitanga Simbitikiri. Lesson because before coming Bitika, a rebel agamu that me, ala Tusina anga that me, Pro rebel anga that me, Pro and ambiguity become being gangape, come being gangambia tendre terchimba fe, Igambi Lidambi Bizako Ben Nayati, Benisum Betoque Asara Tilum, Bimba Bitoko Benisum Biti Voso, Bizani Bimulegimbi Ongina Pine, Oko Tongaso, na Teretim Bimutim Legimbi Obian.
We went with Sylvie as she returned to her house for the first time since she fled.
Regarde ce qu'ils sont faits dans ma maison.
Oui.
Regarde, il n'y a rien dedans.
Ils ont volé les choses ici?
Les choses, les fauteuils, c'est pour la première fois d'arriver ici. Il n'y a pas de fauteuil, j'ai 4 fauteuils classiques avec la tablette, mais il n'y a pas. Regarde comment je suis en train de dormir. Ils ont volé ma lit. Je fais quoi?
It's horrible, man. These Russian mercenaries are really causing a lot of heartache, man.
On the surface, the conflict is a political power struggle. But the cycles of violence here are fueled by a resource war over the country's massive deposits of gold, diamonds, and timber.
There we go.
CPC rebel groups not only tax miners in their territory, but also exchange access to the mines with foreigners who supply them with weapons. They couldn't meet us in Boar, blaming heavy Russian presence, so they agreed to meet us deeper in their territory, in the gold mining region of Wampende, one of their headquarters for the last 3 years. We're on our way to meet a general with the CPC rebel movement, and we've been trying to meet him for weeks, but the government has been blocking access for journalists to rebel-held areas. And now these guys are on the run from advancing government troops and Russian troops. In the face of a government crackdown on media access outside the capital, Vice News was the first team of foreign journalists to access this part of rebel-held territory since the conflict reignited.
Vous n'allez jamais voir une personne avec une arme au coin de la route ou bien une barrière. Mais pour nous, c'est de créer des embuscades. Si vous passez sans notre autorisation, vous allez tomber sur notre embuscade.
Ouais.
Maintenant, ce sont les armes qui vont décider.
Et quand on va quitter ici pour retourner à Bokaranga, est-ce qu'il y a des embuscades ou les checkpoints pour nous?
Non, ça c'est des appels. Tout le monde est au courant de votre arrivée.
Okay.
Puis tout le monde est au courant de votre arrivée. Ça, là, vous n'avez pas besoin encore de vous inquiéter.
Et vous êtes sûr?
Non, je suis sûr.
The CPC has said that your mission is to protect the population and to bring peace to them. But we've spoken to many people who say it's the CPC who is terrorizing them.
Ça, c'est où?
All over the country.
Non.
And there are many reports. No, it's not politics because I spoke to them myself. It's just civilians.
Le village là, vous étiez arrivé tout à l'heure. Vous avez trouvé la population, oui ou non?
Oui.
Si nous maltraitons, nous violons, nous prenons le bien, vous allez trouver personne dans ce village. Bon, oui, parce que maintenant la population est contre nous. Pourquoi? Ils ne nous ont pas compris. Le blocage de l'autre du corridor, ça va les toucher parce que le prix a augmenté à Bangui. Ça, nous le connaissons. Parce que, madame, on n'a pas le choix. Pourquoi on n'a pas le choix? On dit si on veut manger de l'omelette, on est obligé de casser les œufs. C'est le même cas.
Mais il y a beaucoup de gens à Bangui qui souffrent.
Nous le savons, madame. C'est ça, c'est que je vous ai dit que...
Right, April?
Est-ce que maintenant, posez cette question à M. Touadéra, j'espère que vous pouvez le faire.
Mais c'est pas lui qui est bloqué les rues.
Mais c'est lui qui n'a pas accepté la négociation, non? C'est lui qui n'a pas accepté la négociation. S'il avait accepté la négociation, est-ce que tout ça va arriver? Dites-moi, madame, comment vous allez revenir convaincre ces hommes-là pour pouvoir se désarmer de nouveau?
So you're saying the government didn't keep its promises from the last peace deal?
Oui. Ils n'ont rien considéré ou bien honoré ce qu'ils ont dit.
And do you think if you negotiate with the government again, that you'll get what you want this time?
Cette fois-ci, la négociation va être différente. Bon, pour ça, maintenant, ce Bangui, c'est de prendre le pouvoir. On n'a pas le choix.
Wow.
On n'a pas le choix, on va seulement changer le régime.
The government categorically refuses to negotiate with the CPC and defends their decision to lean on outside actors like Russia as well as Rwanda to fight their war. What specifically is the role of your allies like Rwanda and Russia?
Dans le cadre de cet accord que nous avons avec la Russie, nous avons la formation de nos forces armées. Et après la formation, les Russes vont sur le terrain aussi avec les militaires pour l'application et le suivi de ces formations.
Some people, including some of the population who we spoke to, would say there are mercenaries on both sides. Would you disagree with that?
On ne peut pas vous dire que notre pays travaille avec des mercenaires qui travaillent dans l'armée. Je vous rappelle, et je le dis encore une fois de plus, que tout ce que nous avons comme collaboration avec la Russie, que ce soit la fourniture des armes, que ce soit la mise à
Military
disposition
training
des
from Russian
instructeurs russes,
instructors.
tous ces
All
dossiers
of it is passed under
sont
the
passés
approval of
au
the
Conseil
UN
de
Security
sécurité des
Council.
Nations Unies.
The rebels insist that Russians won't make any difference in the long run, but they've clearly already tipped the balance of power in this conflict.
Ils ont vu comment il amène les mercenaires. Ils n'ont jamais cru, personne n'a cru qu'il va amener ces gens de mercenaires.
Talking about the mercenaries. We know the Russians will destroy everything before they leave.
La Russie n'a jamais mis le pied dans
A country invaded by Russians never recovers. We thought we could settle it between us.
Que nous allons régler entre nous, le fils des pays.
Sons of this country.
La guerre n'a pas fini.
The war is not
La guerre
over.
vient de commencer.
The war is only starting.
The president of the Central African Republic has been trying to regain control of his country by leaning on an unlikely ally, a Kremlin-backed private military contractor known as Wagner. Their task is to train the national military and work with a paramilitary group known by locals as the Sharks. But together, they've been accused of doing more than fight off the rebels who've controlled most of the country since 2013.
We've been hearing tons of stories about a certain unit of the military that's being trained by the Russians that's been disappearing people, arresting people, committing other human rights abuses. And it's been really difficult to get people to actually talk to us about it. But after a few weeks of working with local human rights activists, they've identified a few people who are willing to talk as long as we hide their identities.
Wow.
Abida, which is not her real name, sells fabric in the predominantly Muslim neighborhood of the capital known as PK5. Most rebel groups here are from the historically marginalized Muslim community, so Muslims are often swept up in these operations. When a rebel alliance led by the former president marched on the capital in January, she fled with her family.
Then évidemment, les sanctions me voyager mon acheter un petit chimique quoi ça. Là me payer à ça rambi acte de licence mon acte de licence na. Go ça la CPC. Ministre chez intérêt mon petit me kiri là me wara turu na legi arrequin.
We are looking for Muslim women like you. They put me in their vehicle and we went to the foot of the hill.
And when they took you to the hillside, what were they saying?
Hey, Tracy, thank you. Do you know the rebel leader, Bozis? I said, no, I've seen him only in pictures and on TV. But you're Bozir's mistress. I said, no. Sharia law prohibits a Muslim woman from having sex with a Christian. So you don't want to have sex with a Christian? You will today. Oh my God. They undressed me, cut my waist beads, and raped me. There were 3 fair-skinned, what ninjas wear.
Abida told us that white men in the group also used a device to upload her phone contacts and review her recent calls.
Oh my God.
How has that day affected you mentally?
I'm not at peace. My mind isn't working well. I have been asked to do a head x-ray, but I have no money. I don't sleep at night. I can't see well when the sun is out. I'm scared and hardly go out. I am scared. I'm really scared.
Our team reviewed incident reports for 9 other victims of alleged abuses that Russian soldiers oversaw or directly took part in 2021. Activists say they have 46 documented cases in total. We took their claims to Mary Noel Koyara, the Minister of Defense and one of the architects of the deal with the Russians.
There have been some reports from human rights groups and from some victims who we've spoken to ourselves that in incidents with Russian troops have committed human rights abuses, including torture and sexual abuse of victims in their efforts to hunt down the rebels. Is this something that you're addressing?
Les ONG, ils vont sur le terrain ils font des rapports. Bon, nous, on n'est pas au courant. Ils font des rapports, ils envoient des partenaires. Ils disent qu'il y a un non-respect
They
des
say
droits de
human
l'homme.
rights
Mais si
aren't
vous ne
being
vous
respected,
adressez
but if
pas
you don't turn to
au
a government
gouvernement
that
qui est
cares, how can
concerné,
we find
comment
solutions?
on peut avoir une solution? Comment on peut aller
This is what
faire
she's
les enquêtes?
saying.
Comment on peut aller
How can we
discerner si ce qui se dit
investigate?
est vrai?
Will you look into it
Donc,
now that we mentioned
il
it?
faudrait que les ONG nous donnent les bonnes
The
informations
NGOs should give
pour
us the
permettre au
information to
gouvernement de
allow the
prendre les bonnes
government to make
décisions
good
et de suivre
decisions
les actions
and
sur le
monitor the
terrain.
actions in the field.
But one alleged victim of torture at a Russian base did push the government to investigate. According to his brother, who we're calling Bashir, he was killed for speaking out. Can you tell me how your brother got caught up in the violence?
Alangbala arrêté le agolo na chi basala ni que le kwe le fait partie chi azu so gbungu
Saying he's one of the Salika rebel groups, so they kept him there and started torturing him. They cut off his middle finger during the torture. Because he was bleeding a lot, he was handed over to the military.
Ultimately, a local government official cleared him of any wrongdoing and he was released. He had been held and tortured for 3 days at the base and for 3 more weeks in an army hospital in Bangui. He reported what happened to him to the local government and human rights investigators.
He got back to his life, but one day he went to the mosque, and on his way back from prayer, some men followed him. They shot him down and ran away.
Their father pushed local rebel leaders for an explanation.
They found out that Russians paid the killers because of the evidence he had against them, which could have negatively affected their reputation in Bambari. So he had to die. And since they couldn't do it themselves, they paid the rebels to do it.
Diplomatic sources say the claims of Bashir's family are credible, and they're in line with allegations made in a letter sent to Russia by UN human rights experts in April. Investigators wrote that they were concerned about, quote, grave human rights abuses carried out by private military contractors in CAR, including a, quote, Russian-based organization known as the Wagner Group. Russia's ambassador dismissed the claims as baseless, dangerous misinformation. We spoke to one of the researchers who wrote the letter.
Do these findings fit in with a global pattern of what the Wagner Group is allegedly doing around the world in other countries?
Absolutely. So previously we have looked at the role of Wagner in relation to Libya. For example, there were allegations that they'd been involved in extrajudicial killings, and there were also allegations that these contractors were in fact directly participating in the armed conflict. It's extremely concerning. What we're seeing is a pattern of behavior. As soon as you bring private contractors in, it raises all sorts of concerns about accountability. Within militaries, you have clear systems of accountability, you have codes of military justice, you have court-martials. But as soon as you bring these private actors in, it's not clear necessarily what the chains of command are. They're not necessarily even identifiable. So for civilian populations, it's really difficult. They don't know who to turn to because they don't know who actually committed these violations and abuses against them.
Have you had any response from Russia or the Central African Republic government yet?
The Central African government hasn't directly come back to us yet, and we haven't received anything from Russia. But again, Russia has 60 days in which to respond. It's fundamental that states understand that they cannot escape their human rights responsibilities by using private contractors.
Still in mourning and afraid of further retribution, Bashir's family has given up lobbying their case with the government.
How do you feel when you think about the fact that a foreign military did this to your brother in his own country?
They came into our country not to collaborate with us, but to kill us. Those who have committed crimes must be brought to justice, or else they will keep happening. Wow. All right, guys. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about this and, bring it out to my audience. And I appreciate each and every one of y'all listening to this video. Educate your mind and continue to educate your mind. I appreciate y'all. I really don't have any other words right now, but I'll see y'all in my next live. Bye, guys.